Hi everyone, I'm Carrie. I am your EMI webinar coordinator, and I'm joined here today with Kevin Tai. Kevin is a PhD student in Applied Linguistics at UCL. Kevin, could you introduce yourself to us very briefly?
Hello everyone, I'm Kevin Tai and I'm the Economic and Social Research Council Scholar and doctoral candidate in Applied Linguistics at UCL Institute of Education, University College London. And my PhD is about translanguaging practices in Hong Kong EMI classrooms.
Could you tell us a little bit more about your research?
Yeah, sure. Before I start introducing my project, I would like to briefly talk about what translanguaging actually means. So, translanguaging refers to the process of knowledge construction, which involves going beyond linguistic boundaries and also different modalities. So, this notion reconceptualized what language means. So, language is not just about the named languages like Chinese, English, Turkish, or whatever. It really reconceptualized language as multilingual, multimodal, multisensory, and also multisemiotic. So what it means is that with, within the use of linguistic resources, you can look at how people use different ways of speaking, um, the register of the language. It can be everyday type of language versus academic style of language. Um, so, and then for multimodal resources, we can talk about gestures and signs, all sort of things like technology, how all these resources can come together during the knowledge construction process. So my PhD is looking at how translanguaging practices can be deployed in Hong Kong EMI classrooms. Specifically, I'm looking at how different classroom micro contexts, which means different variety of classroom interaction. So rather than analyzing a classroom as as a whole, I kind of divide them into different stages to see how translanguaging can be used to achieve the pedagogical goals within different classroom micro context. I'm very interested to see how translanguaging space is created in all these different micro contexts, because teachers do have their own unique pedagogical goals that they have to achieve, and then they also need to draw on different sociocultural knowledge, pedagogical knowledge, the knowledge about the students into the use of language. So I'm very interested in exploring the idea of translanguaging space in Hong Kong in my classroom. Um, so yes, so my PhD is using linguistic ethnography as the methodological framework, and then I'll be collecting various data such as ear notes, video, video recording the classroom interactions, and I'm doing lots of ethnographic interviews and video stimulation records with speakers to understand their own reflections of their own translanguage practices. So hopefully this PhD's research can build up an empirical basis for the field of EMI. Hopefully can use it to develop some kind of translanguaging pedagogical approach, and then discovering the classroom conditions that are required for these translanguaging practices to be successful. So that's the overall picture of my PhD.
It's a very ambitious project. It sounds like you'll have quite a lot of data in your hands with the interviews and the observations as well as the stimulated recalls. Could you tell us a little bit about why you decided on this topic, specifically why translanguaging in EMI classrooms?
Yeah, sure. Um, so I was actually an EMI. I'm not really EMI teacher. I was actually working as an English teaching assistant at an
Mm.
EMI school, and then I was responsible for coordinating the language across the curriculum project. So that it's basically like a teacher education program for the school to
Mm.
allow English language teachers and science teachers to work together to help each other in teaching science. And then I noticed that for the content teachers, they are not trained as language teachers, but they
Right.
are to use English as a second language to teach the content subject. And in a classroom, there are different types of students. Some students are good at English, some don't. But it doesn't mean that they can't learn the content subject.
Mm.
And some of the students are actually very good at learning science if they don't have the language. And some students are very good at English, but they just don't understand science. So you do
Mhm.
like a diversity within a classroom. And then according to the EMI policy in Hong Kong, you're not allowed to use first language in the classroom. It's a very strict policy.
Mm.
And then I remember that at my own secondary school, um, we place a very heavy, like a very heavy emphasis on English, like
Mm.
using L1 or using entities is seen as problematic, seen as like a problem at all. So and then I think you also know that in the field of EMI, that lots of researchers are doing code switching,
Mhm.
look at the functions of code switching in EMI classrooms. Um, but I always felt like it's more than that. It's not as simple as this person is using English and then he struggles to use English and he now switch to Chinese or whatever. I always felt like there's something more than that.
Mm.
So the doctoral languaging came out in around 2014, and then it was read papers by Professor Li Wei, and he's now my principal supervisor. I mean, I admire him a lot, and that's why my whole PhD is using his definition of translanguaging.
Mm.
Because he argues that translanguaging itself is multimodal. It's really a process for all of us to draw on our own um, multimodal and multi-semiotic resources in creating knowledge. And then to me, education is all about, knowledge construction.
Mm.
And so I felt like, the aim of developing our students, the aim of bilingual education is really, it's not to replace the students, multiple resources, the school-based, the school recognized codes. It's more about, developing the students' communicative repertoire to help them to elevate the language barrier that they currently face in PMI classroom. Um, so, so that kind of motivates me to look at how, and I always think translanguaging is something that we always do. It's not something that is like we don't do, it's an everyday practice. So how can we use this strategy and also spontaneously to facilitate teaching and learning in EMI? Um, and I really want to help those content teachers because they're not language teachers and they always struggle and then they kind of always being
Right.
blamed to use L1. So I was like, actually, they're doing
And
something.
same with the students, right? Same with the
Yeah,
students who are
they're doing
perhaps very
something.
talented in terms of science, but
Yeah.
struggle with their English. It
And then the
seems like your
teachers are
research could be very
blamed.
powerful in pushing
Yeah.
about against English only.
Yeah, I think they're actually doing something unique there, and I think they have to be recognized by somebody. So that kind of motivates me to do this PhD. Yeah,
Oh, well, good luck. It does sound like it could be very important in terms of working to revise policy away from an
yeah,
English-only model to something that reflects the natural bilingual practices of these teachers and students.
yeah,
So tell us
exactly.
a little bit more about your methodology. You said you were
Oh,
doing a linguistic ethnography. What
yeah.
does that entail and why have you selected that?
So for linguistic ethnography, I actually came across that when I was doing my PhD during my first year. And I
Mm.
think it's a very nice framework which allows researchers to combine linguistic analysis with an ethnographic approach. So I think for a traditional ethnography, you have to do this. You do an ethnography for like half a year or even a year or more, and in order to understand a particular culture in a particular setting. But for educational research, we can't really stay at a school for a year.
It's quite
I
difficult.
think,
Yeah.
if you can stay at a school for 3 months, that's already like very
Right.
good. And then and then you also need to do lots of video recordings, and the teachers are just going crazy about it. And then, as you know, currently in Hong Kong, because of the political strike and everything, teachers are very concerned about video recording. So
Sure.
how much can you record? So I think linguistic ethnography has its own advantage that you combine. It doesn't have a particular, length that you have to follow. It can be like a month or two, and you combine linguistic analysis with an ethnographic approach. So what I do is that I will sit at the back of the classroom, and then I will do video recording using one camera, place it at the back of the classroom, and then I will write field notes at least when the teacher is doing teaching. Um, and then, after the lesson, then I will do the ethnographic interview. What it really means is just informal conversation with the teacher. So you talk about how things going, how's the students, what do you think about the lesson? It's just informal chats, and you can audio record that as you go along when you walk around the corridor with the teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Then the video stimulated recall, it's like you present the data to the teacher and prompt him or her to do the reflection. So linguistic ethnography allows us to collect multiple data in order to kind of help analysts to understand what is actually going on in the classroom. Right. Because I'm trained as a conversation and in conversation analysis, and CA is really, I think, as you know, is a method where it allows analysts to understand, doing very detailed turn-by-turn analysis of the interaction. And then very pure CA researchers, they don't care about other things. They only care about what is publicly displayed in the discourse, and what participants are doing, how participants display understanding in the interaction. They don't care about what the people think. Like, this is privately thought. This is not something they're interested in. But then I kind of felt like it's not appropriate, and then it doesn't fit with the translanguaging approach because,
right.
Because translanguaging space, like the term coined by Li Wei, he argues that there are so many things, there's different sociocultural factors such as personal history, identity, our different kind of knowledge that we have. We bring all this funds of knowledge into our use of language, into our daily social interaction. So you kind of need to collect some kind of ethnographic data to show, how translanguaging is produced and why it is produced. So that motivates me to use linguistic ethnography, because it gives you that kind of, flexibility to really understand what is going on in the classroom interaction, to make sense of it. But my professor, he still feels like I'm doing CA work. He doesn't really see me doing linguistic ethnography.
Well, it sounds like a much broader contextual approach than most CA involves. So I suppose that, most CA doesn't necessarily involve interviews and simulated recall and in this intensive research that you're doing in the context. Could you tell us a bit more? So you said linguistic ethnography doesn't need 6 months or a year. How long do you intend your fieldwork to last? Are you working with one teacher, multiple teachers? Could you tell us a little bit more about the context?
Sure. So my original plan is to go back to my alma mater to work with 4 teachers, like 2 geography teachers and 2 history teachers.
Okay.
But because of the recent political protests, and some teachers, somehow they find it really difficult. Like, because originally I want to do a semester, right? I want to do like a 4-month linguistic ethnography. But it turns out that it's really difficult. Like, some teachers was like, no, it becomes a video recording becomes a very sensitive issue. And because I want to do multimodal conversation analysis, I really want to see what is actually going on in the classroom. So video recording is actually the best. Like doing audio is problematic because it's difficult to capture the multimodal aspects of the interaction. And then I decided to change my plan. And then now I will be working with one history teacher and one mathematics teacher at a school with lots of ethnic minority students. So I will be spending my time there for 2 months. Then I will spend another 2 months at my own alma mater working with one history teacher, looking at one class. So I think in total I'm working with 3 teachers, so 3 classes in total.
Right.
And I shorten it into like 2 months, so it becomes more manageable, and then teacher feels safe. I mean, even though if you talk about research ethics, how university protects the identity, this really means nothing to them because I think we as researchers, we understand that for lay readers, they kind of don't really trust it. So you kind of need to be very flexible. I think linguistic ethnography does give you that flexibility. Like I think for people doing ethnography, they have to be flexible. You just can't say to teachers that you want to video record a whole semester. Then it doesn't always work out in that way. So,
no, I think what you're highlighting is a very important issue for a lot of PhD students. I had similar issues in my own data collection, and mine was Turkey, so a different context. But for political reasons, I faced a lot of resistance from teachers to video recording, and so ultimately had to adapt my methodology to include only audio, not video, which meant that I lost a lot of the multimodal data that you're describing. So I think what these considerations, though, of protecting, your participants' privacy and making sure that they feel safe and comfortable, and then also making sure that you can get the data that you need to provide a very rich analysis it's a difficult quandary for a lot of PhD students. So best of luck with that. I suppose just one last question for you. You're very early on in the process of data collection, but you've still done quite a lot of work for your PhD. Do you have any tips or suggestions for researchers who are just starting research on EMI or students who are just starting a PhD program?
Yeah, I think it's important to do pilot study, and I'm very glad that I did that. So I did my pilot study in May.
Okay.
It was a 2-month linguistic ethnography. I actually went back to my alma mater again. I was doing mathematics, and then because at that time it wasn't that sensitive, video recording was fine. So I was looking at how a teacher managed to teach secondary 3, like year 9 and year 10 mathematics class, and I video record every single lessons. And then I was able to collect lots of data from that project. And actually, I'm writing 3 journal papers from my pilot study.
That's great.
The recent political protests, I now need to use my pilot study, and I need to put it into my main PhD now, in order to, to ensure that I have sufficient data for my actual PhD thesis. So my pilot study actually saved my whole PhD. In fact, my professor once said to me that if I can't manage to collect any data in Hong Kong from now till June, that's fine, because I'm able to write my whole PhD thesis based on my pilot study because I collect so much data. So my advice would be that it's important to do pilot study. There's different ways of doing pilot study. Some people just do like a day or two to really try to pilot instruments. But maybe if you can extend it a little bit, if you have time, then why not do a mini study that allows you to write some journal papers for publication? And then that pilot study is actually saving my whole PhD. And then I think my second advice is to, it's important to develop strong arguments. Like you need to have very clear idea about what theoretical frameworks that you're using, your research question, and most of all, what is your argument? Like, what do you want to say? I think that's actually a big lesson for me when I went to UCL, because lots of, including my professor, asking me what what is my argument? And I was like, I don't know, because I used a bottom-up approach. I was always trained to be a conversation analyst, and using that mentality of, unmotivated looking, it's the data tell me what
what
kind
the
of
argument
arguments
is.
that I'm creating, not me imposing on the data. But then I think, for publishing papers, we always need arguments. So it's important that you kind of know what kind of arguments that you'll be making and see whether that reflects in your data.
Right.
And then having these kind of arguments is helpful because you feel safe. You kind of feel like, okay, I'm on the right track. This is something that I'm doing for my PhD. This is something that I'm arguing. And I can convey it to different people, to PhD students, or even to policymakers. Like, this is actually the value of my PhD. So I think establishing a clear argument is very important. I think you have to do it, during your first year of your PhD. I think my third advice is, make sure that you really understand, the fancy terms that you're using. So don't just say that you want to. No, I'm being very serious. Like, I have been, reviewing journal papers for the international peer review journals such as Language and Education, International Journal of Bilingual Education, Bilingualism, and I've seen multiple papers where they just throw the word translanguaging without actually understanding what it is. Because I felt like that I always felt like they don't understand it, and that they kind of force themselves to use it because it's a trendy term.
Sure.
It helps them to publish in top journal. But I was like, eventually it will be rejected by peer reviewers like myself because I can see that you don't understand. So, if you want to use fancy terms like translanguaging, super diversities, post multilingualism or whatsoever, you need to understand it. Like, you need to understand why you're using it. What's the purpose of it? And there are also terms something like transamortizing. That's personally, I don't believe in this. I don't see a relevance of this notion to my PhD, but some people use it without really understanding it. And so, yes, so you kind of need to convince yourself. You just cannot say to yourself that because it's a trendy term and therefore I'm using it. You need to have very good reason, and then I think that comes back to your argument and your theoretical framework. Yeah,
that's very good advice. Yes, and those things are all very much tied together in making sure that you have a strong argument that uses terms correctly, and then also that you've piloted your framework, not only because it might help you later on in the PhD, but it'll probably help you form your argument as well. See how it fits together as a little study.
Yeah, so because of my pilot study, it's about EMI mathematics, and then I'm including this into my own PhD thesis, and that is why I'm now switching my focus to mathematics and history. So it's no longer geography and history anymore. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Kevin, thank you so much for all of your advice today, for all of your reflections. You gave a really wonderful, succinct summary of translanguaging, and I think that that's something that many people are still struggling to understand. So thank you for that, and best of luck with your study. Good luck with your research. Take care, Kevin. Bye-bye.
Talk soon. Bye.
Bye.